What do you mean? You like the fire, you like fire. Somebody call 911. Running for my life, I will always want you. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart. The very next day, you gave it away.
That was interesting. I am Benji Runas and welcome to this channel. So, why do we have names? Well, a name is a personal identifier. The others, they would say that it is something unique that makes us a person. Or maybe it has been a practice of giving new names to newly born babies. However, the name is not the person itself. It is only a signifier. Come to think of this, a person named after a celebrity may take a different path or a different career. Another is a person named after a saint may not turn out to be saintly at all. Let's try to reflect on our career that we want to take during our childhood years. Now, try to compare it today. Is your dream job the same as before compared to now? Of course, some of you would say yes. The others would say totally different. Now, what I'm trying to point out here is that the name is something else. Keep in mind that the self is something a person perennially mold and develop, and that is why it is our responsibility to discover more of ourselves. This was not the case during the ancient times, specifically during the time of the Greek philosophers Socrates, Plato, Pythagoras, and so on. Let us ponder on the self from various philosophical perspectives.
The Greek philosophers were concerned with explaining what the world is really made up of and the changes happening around them, since they were fed up of simply conceding mythological beliefs. Socrates focused on another subject, which is the problem of the self. He was the first philosopher who pondered in a systematic questioning about self, and this became his lifelong mission. The true task of the philosopher is to know one's self. Most men in his reckoning were really not fully aware of who they were and the virtues that they were supposed to attain in order to preserve their souls for the afterlife.
He thought that this is the worst that can happen to anyone, to live but die inside.
Socrates believed that every man is composed of a body and soul. Every human is dualistic, two aspects of person. All individuals have an imperfect, impermanent aspect to him and the body, while maintaining that there is also a soul that is perfect and permanent. Socrates' student, Plato, also supported the idea that man is dual nature. He added three components of the soul: a rational soul, spirited soul, and appetitive soul. He emphasizes that justice in the human person can only be attained if three parts of the soul work harmoniously with one another. And this is found in the book, The Republic. The rational soul is forged by reason and intellect, has to govern the affairs of the human reason. The spirited soul is in charge of emotions and should be kept at bay. Appetitive soul, it is based on desires like eating, drinking, sleeping, and having sex are controlled as well.
When the ideal state is attained, then the human person's soul becomes just and virtuous.
Saint Augustine followed the ancient view of Socrates and infused it with the newfound doctrine of Christianity, which is the bifurcated nature. The first, it talks about man dwells in the world and is imperfect and continuously yearns to be with the divine and capable of reaching immortality. Now the body is bound to die on earth, and the soul is to anticipate living eternally in a realm of spiritual bliss in communication with God. The goal of every human person is to attain this communion and bliss with the divine by living his life on earth in virtue. Thomas Aquinas. He adopted some ideas of Aristotle and supported the idea of man composing two parts, matter and form. The matter, or highly in Greek, common stuff that makes up everything in the universe. The second, which is the form, morphe in Greek, refers to the essence of a substance or thing. The body of a human person is something he shares, even with animals. What differentiates a human from an animal is the soul that animates the body. René Descartes perceived the human person as having a body and a mind. He claims that there is so much that we should doubt. If something is so clear and lucid as not to be even doubted, then that is the only time when one should actually buy a proposition. Descartes thought that the only thing that one cannot doubt is the existence of the self, for even doubts one's self. That only proves that there is a doubting self, a thing that thinks, and therefore that cannot be doubted. Cogito ergo sum. In English, I think, therefore I am. One thinks should lead one to conclude without a trace of doubt that he exists. Cogito, or the mind, and the extensa, or extension of the mind, which is the body. With this,
He believed that the body is nothing but a machine that is attached to the mind.
David Hume believes that one can know only what comes from the senses and experiences, which is under the idea of empiricism. The self is not an entity over and beyond the physical body. The self is nothing else but a bundle of impressions. Now the two bundles of impressions are, we have first impression, basic objects of our experience or sensation. These form the core of our thoughts. Now for example, when one touches a boiling water, the hot sensation is an impression. Impressions are lively and vivid because these give us direct experience. The second one, ideas, copies of impressions. Not lively and vivid as our impressions. Example, when one imagines being poured with boiling water, that is still an idea. Now, the self is simply a bundle of collection of different perceptions, which succeeded each other with an inconceivable rapidity and are in a perpetual flux and movement.
What one thinks is a unified self is simply a combination of all experiences with a particular person.
Immanuel Kant believes that the things men perceive around them are not just randomly infused into the human person without an organizing principle that regulates the relationship of all these impressions. There is necessarily a mind that organizes the impressions that men get from the external world. Example: time and space are ideas that one cannot find in the world but is built in our minds. Kant called these the apparatuses of the mind. Without the self, one cannot organize the different impressions that one can get in relation to his own existence. The self is not just what gives one his personality, it is also the seat of knowledge acquisition for all human persons. After a while, Gilbert Ryle solved the mind-body dichotomy concept. What truly matters is the behavior that a person manifests in his day-to-day life. Ryle suggests that the self is not an entity one cannot locate and analyze, but simply the convenient name that people use to refer to all the behaviors that people make. Maurice Merleau-Ponty, he perceived that the mind-body bifurcation has no effect and an invalid problem. He says that the mind and body are so intertwined that they cannot be separated from one another. He disagrees with the Cartesian dualism that has spelled out so much devastation in the history of man. This is just a plain misunderstanding.
The living body, his thoughts, emotions, and experiences are all one. So those are the classical perspectives. Now, to make it more interesting, I also tried to ask some of my colleagues regarding their perception about self.
Self is actually, it's like a chess piece. If you know the game chess, it's a piece wherein self has need to play a role.
Happy and healthy. Self contains the physical, psychological, and the spiritual nature of man.
Self for me is an art, strength, and sensitive.
Rational creation of God who can reason out things logically. So that is self.
Self is a union of elements such as thoughts, emotions, and actions. It is wonderfully and fearfully made by God.
3 words: individuality, create, and temporal. Our individuality and it is something that we create, and so it's temporal.
Well, that will be great, awesome, and dynamic.
For me, I define self as dynamic. We are changing to become better. Not only better, but to become the best version of ourselves.
No man is an island. Everyone has the ability to connect and to have a relationship with other people, not only with other people, but to connect also with everything around us. Self is relational.
The self is exploration. Personally, I find myself meaningful as I explore
or encounter many answers to the question of why I am living.
The self has 6 major dimensions: physical, sexual, spiritual, economical or material, political, and lastly, digital nowadays.
Now, despite of the many supporting and contradicting perspectives, we have to be grateful that these perspectives have been the sole foundation of what is truly the meaning of self.
So it doesn't matter if your name is this or this one. Remember, we have the ability to decide of who we become. So for me, we are all like a piece of paper, and as we go through life, we grow, we develop, and we still have the ability to decide if we would like to stay like a plain paper or to transform into a special one.